You are listening to Fox Radio 910 or 104.3. Welcome to Front Porch Tales, our bi-weekly program featuring Appalachian stories and mountain characters that still live and treasure the old ways. We feature a variety of guests willing to walk back in time with us and discuss the history and cherished legacy of our mountain heritage. We hope our shared stories will grab your imagination and hold special interest for our senior audience. This outreach to the Roanoke senior community is sponsored by Crowning Touch Senior Moving Services at 6704 Williamson Road in Roanoke. And my name is Linda Balentine, founder and CEO of Crowning Touch. And we are the only local moving company that focuses on seniors making a move, and the only moving company that can write you a check. And so how do we do that? Well, we can sell what our clients no longer want in either our consignment shop or our auction house. Then we split the proceeds 50-50, and that money can help offset the cost of a move. Check out our Browse and Bid auction. You can bid online or in-house. To register and see pictures of everything, go to crowningtouchusa.com. And of course, if you need a moving estimate, give Anna a call at 540-982-5800. So now let me introduce my guest for today, Chip Hill, a pastor, author, farmer, and a Highland County resident for over 55 years, and a dear friend. Chip has more than a hay wagon full of Highland tales to share on this series that we're getting started. So let's get started and archive some of these vintage tales. It's fun to look back, although there's a lot about Highland County that hasn't changed. So the point of this series is to try and capture the stories, the characters, the standout moments in time from 40 and 50 years ago. Highland has always been a special place, and even now it is the least densely populated county east of the Mississippi. But let's start with a little history of Highland. So, Chip, why don't you fill us in?
Well, Highland County, Linda, I guess has been a county. It was made from Bath County and Pendleton County, West Virginia, and they were combined in 1847. And Highland County was established with Monterey being the county seat. And but that's not where our history really began. Our history began with the first pioneers that came in here, and that would have been sometime in the 1740s, 1750s. And then they just began to sprinkle in here from mainly from the southern part of Highland County. Was developed and was a part of Bath County, and it hosted mostly the Scots-Irish.
Right.
The German faction of Highland County came in through Pendleton County from the Harrisonburg area, and they established the northern parts of Highland County. And then over the years, the two factions, the Scots-Irish and the Germans, they began to intermarry, and now we've just got descendants of both peoples, all over the county.
And it seems like there were the population was denser back there in the 1800s and early than it is right now, because now the population is the population of Monterey still about 300 people, more or less, give or take. It's growing.
The Highland County population is only around maybe 2,200 people, 2,300 people. When I moved here in 1968, there were about 3,500 people, and all the way back in the early part of the 1900s, there were over 5,000 people.
Yeah, because I remember I had a farm here for a while. I lived here for 25 years.
Yeah.
And I had a farm on Jack Mountain, and I used to love to ride my horse up the old wagon trails.
Yeah.
Because the tops of the mountains had homesteads on them, with orchards and everything else. But they aren't there anymore.
No, they've all been taken over by the forest.
Mm-hmm.
And there used to be what's called bridle trails or bridle paths all over the mountains, especially going through the low places, because people, rather than get on a horse or in their wagon and drive all the way up or ride all the way up to a gap and going through to the other valley, they found the low places to be much quicker. So there's old footpaths that go over from valley to valley, and I know where a lot of those footpaths are down in my area, southern in the Mill Gap area of Highland County.
And that's fascinating.
It is fascinating. And you can go up there now and you can see the indentation of where the path was. Some of it's filled in, but some of it's still very much visible.
So it wasn't just the pioneers, the Germans, the Scotch-Irish. There were a lot of Indians here. Which Indian tribes were here?
Yeah. The Indians that were in here mostly up in Highland County were Senecas and the Mingos and the Shawnees. And the Shawnees were kind of a later tribe. They came into they were driven actually into the Ohio River area and points just west of the Ohio River early in the 1700s, and then but they really established themselves strongly, and then they hunted through West Virginia and into Highland County and Bath County and Pendleton County, West Virginia, and this was their hunting grounds.
You know, you've done a lot of writing. 5 years worth of chronicling, at least 5 years, right, of chronicling the history.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really appreciated and loved was the way you could pinpoint some big old tree that you know is hundreds of years old, and then you would talk about all the animals that had passed under that tree and all the moccasined feet.
Yes.
And it just grabs me, you know, and there are those places, there are old homesteads that are, you know, that have been there surviving for almost 200 years, even though they're tattered and haven't been redone. Yeah. Springs, old springs that are...
Yeah, foundations.
That's right, foundations, old chimneys, that type of stuff.
Talking about the trees, there's a black walnut tree over in the Hightown area of Highland County they say is the oldest in the state.
Wow.
It belongs on the property of Steve Bird.
Is it still in good shape?
I haven't seen it in years, but I've heard that it's still in pretty good shape, but it's huge.
And Hightown used to be, the postmaster's name was
Heavner.
Heavner.
Yeah.
And
Jacob Heavner.
The story, or it was a National Geographic article, that the river that falls on one half of his barn runs into the Potomac, and the other half, the watershed, runs into the James. Is that
right,
correct?
Yeah. That's why they called it Dividing Waters Farm.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
But Jacob, that farm was sold a number of years ago, and it's changed hands several times. And that barn actually is no longer in existence.
Oh.
But still, they're on the divide.
Right.
See, that's Highland County's got a divide that runs right through the middle of it from east to west. Hightown is on the divide, Monterey is on the divide, McDowell is on the divide, and Headwaters is on the divide. And the waters running south go into the James, and the waters running north go into the Potomac.
Wow.
And but over at Hightown, yeah, that was the Dividing Waters Farm, named because of that.
And I spent a lot of years living in the beautiful little hamlet of Bluegrass, Virginia, and I believe all of that water, because it was the headwaters of the Potomac right there, did flow into the Potomac all the way up from, what is the name of that area up above where Fitz...
Little Mountain, Laurel Fork.
Laurel Fork.
Yeah.
That's an exquisite place. Anybody listening here that wants to have a beautiful drive through Laurel and rhododendron, taller than you can tunnel through the rhododendron up there. It's exquisitely beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's just a beautiful place.
Unspoiled.
It is. We used to have trail rides back there.
Oh, yes.
And camp out back there.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Now, going back to the trees, you mentioned that black walnut. I have a white oak tree on one of my places that I bought a few years ago that belonged to an old man named Fred Gum. And there's this white oak tree that I have estimated, it's 24 feet around the girth, and we estimate it's between 400 and 500 years old.
Wow.
And I named that tree Uncle Fred. So now my children and my grandkids, we all refer to Uncle Fred. And then there's a few weeks ago we did a little history thing over at Pisgah Church. It's used to be a Presbyterian church. Now it's more like a community center on the Hightown Road from Meadowdale to Hightown. And there's an oak tree out there they said is 300 years old. So even that tree could possibly, when it was a sapling, seen the moccasined feet of Senecas or Shawnee warriors or hunting parties.
So is Fred, the tree?
Fred is on my place.
Yes. Is it still in good health?
Pretty good health.
It could live another 100, 200 years?
I hope so.
Yeah.
But there's this thing called the emerald
Oh, the green
Ash
borer.
borer.
Yeah, the ash borer. But does it bother oak trees?
Yes, it works on those. It's
Oh,
already killed all our
no.
ash trees.
Yes, I know. I treated one in my yard.
Yeah.
Recently, even in Roanoke,
Yeah.
I had to treat it, and you have to treat it every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I got it when it was only about 10% affected, and
Yeah.
so it has a good chance. I have a good chance to save it.
Good. I wish all of them could have been saved. They're dropping like flies all over the forests of Virginia.
That is so
West
sad.
Virginia.
It's another tragedy, like the chestnut blight.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, one that had died a few years ago, part of it broke out one day on a clear day, no wind, fell out and hit a logger and killed him.
No.
Down in, I think in Bath County.
Was that because it was diseased?
It was diseased. The tree
And
was
that's
dead.
why.
It
Oh,
was
no.
dead, yeah. So they're very dangerous. They're very dangerous. I've talked to loggers who say every time they go into the woods for the day to saw trees down, they feel like they're being hunted
Isn't that
because
something?
you never know when one's going to fall.
Oh, for goodness'
In fact, I was sitting on my front porch this morning reading my Bible and having my coffee, and I heard another huge tree fall up in the woods behind my house.
Wow.
It's a common thing. There's so many blights that have come through here and have killed so many trees. And so now the emerald ash borer
Doesn't have
is working on white oaks.
All right, and it doesn't have the emerald ash borer, doesn't have anything. It's not.
Nothing.
There's no predatory anything.
No, not yet.
Huh.
No, there's a virus or a fungus or something that helps eliminate the gypsy moth, which has killed a lot of trees.
That's right. Yeah.
But this emerald ash borer, I don't know if they've got a handle on that yet.
How are the sugar maples doing? I know that when the Indians used to come through this area, they would tap and take bark cones and leave them on the trees and then come back after a winter in the spring and collect the sugar that had collected after everything had dripped out. They weren't gathering maple syrup the way we were, but they were getting the sugar.
Yeah.
So the trees had to have been here then, but they're in good shape now, correct? I mean, that's people in Highland County are still
They're still
tapping their trees and
the maples, they've got something that's bothering them, but nothing as severe as the emerald ash borer.
well, that would be heartbreaking.
Yeah. But the maple trees are still still pretty healthy.
So what do landowners do to pay their taxes around here in Highland County? Have they always raised the sheep that are here now? It's sheep and cattle, but it was historically, is that what they
Sheep and cattle were the main thing, but then the coyotes came.
Oh,
in the 80s,
that's right.
In the late 70s and early 80s, and put a lot of sheep farmers out of business. Now, there are a few people that still raise sheep, but they all have to have guard dogs or llamas or donkeys.
What kind of guard dogs did you tell me once were good? There's, yeah.
Well, they have the Great Pyrenees. A lot of people have the Great Pyrenees. Then there's the Anatolian Shepherd or the Kangal, which they're very close. Other people have. What are some of the other dogs they might have out there? They do have donkeys.
Yes, they do. Donkeys.
They have llamas. Some of them. And that's helped somewhat, but I'll tell you what, those coyotes they're crafty.
Now, there were no coyotes before. They came in the 80s.
No,
so there weren't, but they were bear. There were more bear than there are now. In other words, something's always been, attacking the livestock of settlers.
Yeah, well, to begin with, when they first started settling this area,
there were cats, weren't there?
They had panthers and they had wolves.
Yeah, right.
In fact, Aunt Deanie Wade, who was an old lady who died in about 1981 at 107 years of age, she was a friend of mine. I used to sit and talk with her when she was 100 and over, and she told me that the last wolves that were killed in the Mill Gap area, in the Back Creek Mill Gap area of Highland County, the last wolves were killed by her father and an older brother.
For goodness sake.
They had gotten into their sheep that morning. In fact, they were sitting in the kitchen, their old home place, up against Back Creek Mountain. And as they were sitting in the kitchen, the sheep came running off the hill, and one of them ran into the kitchen with the family. And the men got up and looked out the window, and the wolves were into a small flock of sheep that they had up on the hill.
Oh, my gosh.
And that's all anybody had back in those days were small flocks of things, or small herds.
Right.
And so that evening, the men drug a dead mule up on the mountain, up on Back Creek Mountain behind their house, and put poison in it. And that night, the last of the wolves got into the poison, and that eliminated the wolves in the Mill Gap area. And that would have been probably in the maybe the 1870s, 1860s, 1870s.
So you're a farmer. You have no sheep. You have some cattle.
I used to have 150.
Wow.
Or one time 180 head of ewes. Now here in Highland County, we call ewes, and we call rams bucks.
Uh-huh.
You know, we have our own way of speaking up here in Highland County. We got our own colloquialisms, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the time that they shear the sheep is in the spring, but I saw some real short sheep. It looked like they'd just been sheared. When I was driving up here today from Roanoke, I was surprised that they were.
Those are probably the hairless sheep. Some people have gone to hairless sheep, or what? They don't. You don't have to shear them.
Yeah, they didn't look like they had much of a coat on them.
No, they don't.
Well, what happens? What good are they? Are they raising them for meat?
Meat. And what it is they in the fall, they grow their hair out for warmth, and then in the spring, they shed it. Kind of like a dog.
They just shed it.
Does, yeah.
I wondered because I'd never seen a flock that clean cut looking.
Yeah. And there's still some that have your typical Suffolk ewes or, Dorsets, and they have to get somebody to shear them.
That was a real art. I've watched, way back in the day, you watched somebody was cranking or there was a pedal, and then they had shears that were powered by somebody cranking something as opposed to because they'd be out in the middle of a field, no electricity, no generator, and they just used those shears, and it was the art to try and get a fleece off all in one piece. Yeah, with a few cuts to the sheep.
Yeah. When I started raising sheep in 1968, first thing that happened to us is the flock we bought, which was a flock of maybe 30 ewes. Unfortunately, some of them had foot evil, not foot evil, but foot rot.
Yeah, foot rot.
And we had to doctor those things.
Did you run them through a tank? Is that what they used to do for that?
What you do is you turn them up on their rear ends, and then you trim their feet until their feet bleed.
Oh, my.
And then you stand them in a vat of formaldehyde.
Oh, my gosh.
And you have to do that treatment 2 or 3 times to kill it. We
Man.
never could get over it. So we sold our flock. Then we got a new flock and grew from there. And I can remember shearing. We had some of the funniest things. I was always the guy that caught the sheep and drug them to the shearers. And our first shearer was a man named Ellery Curry, and he sheared. He put 2 sawhorses up and a door, an old wooden door on the sawhorses, and I'd have to put the.
Oh no, my
he'd
gosh!
He'd help me. We'd lay the ewe up on the door, and then he would shear it up on the door.
Flip it from one side to the other and get it. Wow!
And his mama, she was real country. She was an old mountain woman cut from old mountain stock, and her name was Glenna Curry. And one day, one of the sheep that he was shearing started hyperventilating, and she took her straw hat off and started waving it, fanning the sheep, and she said, "Hurry up, Ellery, she's pantified. She's pantified." So we picked up a new word, pantified. So if you ever hyperventilate, you'll be pantified.
I know. If we have any more of this 90-degree plus weather, I'm going to be pantified. Oh, that's funny. Well, and I used to actually, I raised a few sheep. I'm going to tell you a story. I raised sheep, farmers whose ewes had triplets, thought that one of the triplets may not live, was too big a burden on the ewe. So I would go out, they would call me, and I would go out to Puffenbarger's or something and pick up, and bring it back, keep it at the wood stove and bottle feed it because I had goats and I would feed it the goat's milk and all that other stuff. So I raised up a beautiful, beautiful buck. And And I was so proud of myself that come the county fair that I decided, first of all, I thought, well, I've probably got a prize winner here, but I couldn't keep him long enough because he started to butt me. And he would leave the ground about 6 feet away, but I was pregnant. And I sidestepped one time, and he went past me and hit the fence post, a locust fence post, and it didn't even seem to bother him. You know, they've got that thick skull right there where they butt things. So that frightened me. So I put him in the truck, and I took him down here to the stock market. And took him on out, and I was so proud of him because he was so beautiful and big and fat. And they put him in the ring, and they put a blue mark on him. And I asked somebody, I said, so, and this was when I was new to the country way of life and way of thinking. And I said, well, so what does that mean? He says, oh, he's gonna do well there. And I said, so where's he gonna go? I thought somebody was gonna go and take him, buy him, and keep him for a pet. And he had this beautiful coat that I'd taken care of. And he said, oh no, he's gonna go for meat. Somebody's just gonna buy him for meat. And I burst into tears. And I did. I burst into tears. I made them reload that buck into my truck and took him back up to my farm.
Oh my!
And I couldn't handle the thought of it because I just wasn't in gear yet with what living in the country really meant in terms of raising animals and and what you do with them. So then I just put up with that ornery guy.
That's right. You came from Northern Virginia.
I did. I came from Washington D.C. And I was teaching. I was teaching in the suburbs. Yeah. And then we came on out here and we bought a farm, and the farm had no electricity, no water.
Yeah, you were one of Highland County's original hippies.
I was.
And folks listening, if you didn't know this, Linda was at Woodstock.
That's right. I really was. That qualifies me. That's a badge of honor.
Yeah,
a badge of honor.
That's right.
But what I loved about it so much, Chip, and it wasn't just me, but everybody else of our generation. When we came out here, there was the greatest generation who have now basically passed on.
Right.
They'd be 100 years old or more now.
Yes, they would.
But they were here, and their children had left. And so they really welcomed us with open arms. In other words, we rebuilt a farm. We rebuilt a turn-of-the-century farm. We cut down what was left of the chestnut trees and hauled them down with a workhorse, and we plowed our garden with the workhorse, and I toted water, and we cut up all our firewood, and we did all of that, and they were more than willing to teach us the art, and there's a real art. It was their heritage, and they passed it on to us. Yeah. And so I'm hoping in this series we're going to have the opportunity to catch some more of these stories. But I mean, they came on up, and I would run out. Of course, I ran out of chicken feed on the very first winter. And back then we had some winters. It would snow before Thanksgiving, and the snow didn't melt until Easter. And I was way up on the mountain.
You were way up.
I was way up, and you couldn't even really access it. You had to ford a river to get on up there, and there was nobody up there. And so when it really snowed and I couldn't get out because the ford had washed out, I had to go next door and get Floyd and Blanche to go to the co-op for me because they had a footbridge over to their trucks. And they went and got some chicken feed for me. And it was the only time I ever ran out. I never ran out again. But I had to lead my workhorse on over there and put the chicken sacks over on his back and then bring him back. And then that got me through until there was enough of a melt that I could get out. And,
Yeah, that's the way it was. And folks, this is really the way it was. And it would be again if we got snows like we used to.
That's correct. That's correct. Or, heaven help us if there's some cyber attack. But there are a whole bunch of people out here in Highland County that would do pretty well, even with the cyber attack, because they still have their root cellars and they still know how to
survive.
That's right. They know how to survive.
Know how to live off the land, and that's what brought all of you all back here.
That's correct.
That's what brought my father here, even though he wasn't a hippie.
Right.
He was a World War II bomber pilot. And when we moved out here, none of the hippies had come yet.
That was an interesting thing. Why did your dad come? Why do you think he came? That was because he came from Richmond.
He came
from
Norfolk.
Norfolk.
Yeah, he came because he'd always wanted to live on a farm.
Isn't that the neatest thing?
Always loved farm animals. So when he was in his 40s, early 40s, he saw his way clear to sell his real estate business. He had a brokerage firm there in Norfolk.
And that's something.
And he came up here and rode around with the only real estate agent in Highland County back in the mid-'60s was Bruce Richardson.
I know Bruce.
And he came up and he rode around with Bruce and finally found the farm in Mill Gap that he moved us to on July 1st, 1968. And on the morning that Dad and I came up, we came up the day before the rest of the family. And we came up in a big U-Haul with all of our stuff, a big U-Haul. And we backed into the back porch of the old farmhouse that he had bought on 317 acres. And he said, well, we'll unload in the morning. Let's go ahead and turn in, because we were both tired. We loaded the truck that day and driven all the way up from Norfolk. And so we threw our sleeping bags down on the floor in the house and we went to sleep. The next morning at about 7:30, we were awakened by the sound of trucks. And we got up and we looked out the window, and all of these neighbors who we didn't know yet came driving up in their trucks and cars, got out, rolled up their sleeves, and helped us unload the truck and set everything in place. That's the kind of people live in Highland County.
I know it. That's right. They really understand and they taught me. I learned so many lessons when I lived here for the 25 years that I was here.
Yeah.
And that is one of the lessons. It's a pitch in, get it done.
Yeah.
Teamwork kind of place. And they offer, and you don't have to,
Well, who were some of the ones that you found most helpful to teach you all how to?
For instance, Bill Will. I had a baby, and there was I had no phone.
Jimmy and Jackie's daddy.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And so the word got out into the little town of Bluegrass that I'd had a baby at home, and they did what's called a pounding. And a pounding meant that you would bring up a pound of sugar and a pound of butter and a gallon of milk, and those were the types of gifts that they brought a new mother. And I certainly appreciate it, but they walked up the hollow. They had to ford it was a mile walk up in there.
Who were some of the others? Because I'm thinking of the Bluegrass area, mostly the northern part of the county.
Carl Hall.
Yep.
He was a strategic partner with us when we were designing furniture, when we were designing actually equipment make.
Right.
And he created an incredible
he was
hydraulic drill for us.
Mechanic and inventor.
He was. It was just the type. And the neat thing was, in a small community, everybody has a chance to explore their gifts because everybody is so needy. So everybody is really, really appreciated at a level that they don't necessarily appreciate you. It certainly has nothing to do with what degrees you got, but it has to do with what type of practical
skill you have,
skill and ability you have, and your attitude, your pitch and attitude.
And then wasn't there an old man back in Allegheny Mountain named Rowan?
Oh yeah, Rowan Selman.
Yeah.
Rowan Selman. We're going to have a story about him, and we've got Maggie. I'm going to get Maggie to go ahead and contribute some of these stories, and we'll have to talk to her because and even we might have to get Penn Goodall to contribute a little something, too, because he's still up there.
He is.
I know. Well, these are the people that came and.
Penn's kind of like Jeremiah Johnson. At the end of the Jeremiah Johnson movie, they say, and some folks say he's up there still.
Well, it's this place has my heart. Highland County has my heart, and I love to even reflect. We'll have some more stories. We're going to talk about hunting trips. I'm going to talk about the trail rides, like the time that I was out there with Jimmy Varner and everybody else. There was we went up in the mountain, and everybody always took a gun because you might have to shoot your horse. That's what Jimmy told me, because if they ever got torn up, you couldn't. There was no way to get. We rode way up in the mountains, and there was no way to save a horse once you were that far up. I think I'll save that story for another time.
Do you remember the time? Do you remember when Wayne Marshall was riding with us, and when we came to Goodall's Pond? We all for the horses to drink. Wayne's horse, Saber, he wouldn't stop. He walked right down into the pond with Wayne on his back, and we all just howled.
There's some great stories. I'm just going to go ahead and close this off just for today. We're going to go ahead and have these series. It's just fun to reminisce and talk about all this. But this series, The Highland Tales, is brought to you by Crowning Touch Senior Moving. We are out there on Williamson Road. We would love to help you with your move or help you sell the things that you need help selling. But I just want to thank Fox Radio on behalf of our senior listeners. Fox Radio 910 and 104.3.